So, project took a bit of a swing. We finished up last with the rear main sill, and then got the oil pan mounted back up with the new sill on that. And then I decided I was going to do a valve adjustment and replace the valve cover gasket. Well, since I have a supercharger, it is a bit of a pain to get the valve cover off unless anybody out there knows a trick or two. So I started taking the supercharger off, and I will give you a shot of where we're at. So got a few interesting points here. I ended up having a acorn nut, let me get in there, which did not want to be removed. Caused a few issues, and that's where I'm stuck at the moment. So on this Jackson Racing supercharger, in order to get this main section off here, that the bracket for all your idlers and your pulleys, to get that off of the vehicle, you have to remove, at least in my case, I had to end up removing the supercharger itself, which makes it much easier just to remove that unit, and then you can take the jack shaft, and I've got the S-tube and throttle linkage and all this disassembled and off to the side. So it's a little bit of an interesting removal process. If anybody out there who does have an H22 with the Jackson Racing supercharger on it, it's a bit of a struggle, a bit of a hassle. Probably should have done this first before I started many things. Now I have access to brackets where I removed the hard line to the clutch. You can see there. And so we're going to move on. I'm going to get that acorn nut off of the stud on that side there. What I started doing, got myself a Dremel here, and I cut into it, and then I took a chisel and I tried to separate it, and then I'm going to take a pair of pliers or something that can fit into that gap and then spread it and get it off the threads. All it's doing is spinning round and round and round, so I can tell that the stud itself isn't spinning. I'm being precautious. I'm using a magnet, leaving it there. Hopefully chunks of whatever that might be made of metal that can fall into the magnet. So that's where we're at. Some components of the supercharger. You can see the supercharger itself. Here's that pulley. I'm getting about 9 pounds of boost. Maybe it's my elevation is why I'm getting 9 pounds. But this is a Jackson Racing 3.4 diameter. I think you can go to like a 2.9 and grab a few extra pounds. I'd be interested to see if I can purchase one, if I can get one that fits onto this shaft. So we'll see about that. Here's a couple of the idlers that you have to remove when removing the plate and the jack shaft at the same time, which I'll place right there in front of everything. Get you a shot there. So some pulleys and idlers. This whole unit has to come off. At least I had to take it off. Couple mounting holes here and there. It's pretty dirty, and we're going to go ahead and clean that up and make it nice and new, and I'll do a complete video on the installation. I did not, however, have a video on the disassemble, so I apologize for that. A couple components here for the disassemble process that you didn't get to see, but I'll show it to you at a later time. So as for now, I'm going to go ahead and move forward, and I'm going to get that valve cover off and hopefully get a valve adjustment done. Then we can put new gaskets on, and I'll make a video on the installation of said supercharger. All right, so there is the culprit behind a few extra agonizing hour being precautious, slow, methodical, cutting into it. And this is just an acorn nut, a little 10 mil. Holds the valve cover down on that sill. Apparently, I think the stud stripped out, but grabbed a few threads at the end. And when I went to remove it, it just spun. It never caught another thread. It was stuck on the last couple. So I went ahead and used a Dremel and cut into the side of it, being very mindful, using a magnet next to it, hopefully catching any metal particles. I was able to get into there and then use a chisel, kind of crack it, and then I just kind of separated it and removed it. And then I went through with a magnet again around the area, off the stud, since there was a bunch of particles everywhere sticking off of the stud, trapped in the messed up threads. So there it is. There's my little bastard of a acorn nut that was holding me back. What would have took an easy 20 minutes of removal with all the prep and precautions, 20 minutes, took an hour. Not cool. But we got the valve cover off. Looks fantastic inside. Looks super clean. I don't know what the heck. It is clean. I like it. So the valve cover's off. Let's take a peek at what we got here. Get a little extra light. See if we notice anything. So, not bad. Not super clean, but it's an engine. It's got oil in it. Gets oil stains. Timing belt looks to be pretty good. Probably a good time to replace it. Don't really feel like it. But it's there. It's in decent shape. I'm not seeing any signs other than some possibly walking, as you can tell, of the smoothness. A little line right there. I bet you she's due for a replacement in the future, but it looks clean. I think the sills are decent. See if we can get in there and look. I got a little oil on them. I bet you, oh, that one not so bad. Everything looks pretty decent. A little grime here and there, but I have seen 10 times worse. I'm calling it pretty decent. And there's the booger right there. They gave us all those interesting little problems. So, like a $10 stud there. Go ahead and get that one removed. We'll clean it up, get the remaining magnetized particles off of it, and clean it up. We'll clean this surface here around the whole cylinder head. Get all that old gasket on these Hondas. It's always best to use a little bit of Honda Bond or seal it in the corners, as you can tell. Right there on every corner, every little nook and cranny. And someone did so at some point. Looks like stock cams. Doesn't look like aftermarket. So nothing there to increase value or importance. Just stock. Hey, that's fine. We've been making good power with it. Little wear here and there. We're definitely getting some wear, probably from the abuse. We're going to do a valve clearance inspection, and we'll go from there. Plenty of videos out there on how to do a valve adjustment. I'm going to go ahead and do one with the understanding that you know what a valve adjustment is. We're going to replace the seal on that bad boy. That looks like an OEM aftermarket perhaps, but we're going to go with a VMS that I found online for a reasonable price. We'll get all this cleaned up. We'll get the valve adjustment done. We'll find the top dead center, and we'll go from each side, exhaust, intake. When you're running boost, it's good to have nice tight tolerance. Get that recommended manufacturers, and we'll put that up here on the video. I'll let you know what that clearance is for your exhaust and for your intake valve clearances. I believe it's 8 thousandths, maybe 5 thousandths intake, 8 thousandths, but we'll double check it. It's been a little while since I've done a valve adjustment. We'll get this cleaned up. I'm gonna have to order a stud, so this is gonna be sitting here for a little bit. We'll clean that valve cover up. It's in pretty good shape. Maybe a simple wipe down, get some of that staining off of it. Nothing too aggressive, no chemicals or nothing. We'll just do a simple wipe down. We'll get the exterior cleaned back up, nice and shiny. Get that valve adjustment completed, and we'll be rocking. I don't think it'll be necessary for a timing belt at this time. Everything looks pretty clean in there, and if I'm going to do a timing belt, water pump, oil pump, I'm going to end up pulling the motor and doing some massive updates, and financially it's just not that time. So I went ahead and I replaced the cam seal, which looked pretty much like a stock original, and I replaced it with this VMS blue red cam seal. And I really like the design and I like the look. I recommend when you're doing something like changing cams or anything like that, doing valve lashing adjustments, replacing seals, if you have the income to do so, dress it up just a touch. These aluminum CNC machine cam seals are definitely a better choice than that other option. So I'm doing some valve adjustments here, and on the intake side we have a tolerance between 0.006 and 0.007 on your intake side. On your exhaust side, you have a tolerance of 0.007 to 0.008. That should be correct. So the tool I use, and I'm sure you all use the same thing out there, is this little power built, basically screwdriver attached to it. And then say we're going to come in here and do a valve adjustment. I'm going to go ahead and try to simulate that with one hand. I know it's not going to be too easy. Give me a second here. So you use this as your socket, and you will take the, currently I'm doing number 1, and I've just finished up, but the number 1 position on your timing right there, as you can tell, I've got the arrows up on both cam gears, and then across there right in the center, right there, those 2 lines, they match up just straight across. That's top dead center for number 1. That's where we want it. I went ahead and double checked my intake side with the filler gauge, and I went to the tightest tolerances I could get, and I'm using this .006. Can't really see that on there, but .006 here, and they were spot on. It was perfect. Exhaust side was a little loose. I'm going with the tighter tolerance of the .007, and that gave me a little bit of what I felt was a little open, so I went ahead and tightened it up. And in doing so, you basically set this in. You loosen it up with this handle here, and then you make a slight adjustment. If you want to tighten it, you just go righty-tighty, make a slight adjustment, tighten it down, and you have to get a feel for it and use your feel gauge after you tighten it down. Slip it in, see if that feels nice and snug, or too tight, too loose. You should be able to glide right in with a slight catch, but not really, kind of right in between. Once you get done with number 1, you'll move on to, I believe it's number 3 will be up next. Once you get to number 3, you'll verify position. So once number 3 is good, you will verify on the markings here. I believe both cam gears, and I may be wrong, I believe both cam gears are in the left position over on this side. So you'll have both arrows to the left, about right here. And you'll have, you'll rotate it again. You'll go to number, what is it, number 4? Yeah, you go to number 4. Once you get done with that, on number 4, doing your adjustments, checking verifications on each one, you'll head over to number 2, and then your arrows will be on the right-hand side. So top dead center for 1, top dead center for number 3. Straight down will be top dead center for 4. Straight over to your right, top dead center for number 2. Now remember, this is a counterclockwise rotation motor, meaning that from that right there, and I recommend buying one of these little tools on your crankshaft pulley when you're going to rotate this. What I did is I bought this tool, and you cannot work without it to break that. I mean, I guess you could if you had a really nice impact and air supply, but this one's been modified specifically for this car. I know it's not much, but anyway, you can buy these things for like 15 bucks online. It's just a cast iron, basically socket with a hole in it. You can attach a breaker bar here to hold that pulley in place while you take a 19 millimeter socket and another breaker bar, and it's like 182 foot-pounds. Doesn't sound like much, but it's a lot. On this particular one, for the Prelude, I needed about an inch off on this one that I purchased. So if you look at this and you go to slide this in, you're right up against the side of the car on that fender well welding area support structure. So anyway, I had to take about an inch of this off so I could slide it up in there and apply the needed rotation. Anyway, remember, counterclockwise. H22, counterclockwise. One thing you can tell, but when you look at a motor that's an H22 and you've got a, say, a B18, yes, difference in liters, difference in valve covers, also a difference in where your distributor sits. Distributor on your Bs are going to be on your far side to the firewall, whereas in the H22s, distributor sits on your exhaust cam, on closest to the front of the car. So you can definitely tell the difference. This is why this is a counterclockwise motor. This is how they built them. Don't ask me why. Anyway, so yeah, once you get that done, make sure you're rotating it and you're stopping at each point. Now there's tons of videos out there that go way into depth. Just remember that when you're running a turbo or a supercharger, you're going to want to be on the tighter tolerance on your your adjustments for your valve adjustment. If you're running a naturally aspirated, you could probably go a little more towards the loose side, especially if you're running updated cams. If you are thinking about going for an update on a cam, think about other aspects that are always forgotten. Will this affect, will I have an engine light on? Will I have, and is that something I don't want to have? Am I going to have consumption of oil more than these H22s already consume? I don't know. There's tons of things you should think about. It's a project car. Is it a street car? Is it a track car, race car, drift car? Whatever kind of car you're working on, think about those little aspects. But anyway, I wanted to show you just a touch basis with the lash, the valve adjustment, and I'm getting this thing wrapped up. I'm done with number one. It'll take me 10 minutes to get the other ones. Once that's finished up, I have to wait for bolt B right there. You see that empty spot? Yep. So I struggled taking the valve cover off. I was working on getting the supercharger off and the valve cover off for all these adjustments and new parts. And this bolt right here, the stud, this is perfectly fine. This thing right here looked really nice. Now this puppy right here. So, I don't know if you could really see it, but it basically balled out on the thread. So let me get that acorn nut. I saved this just because I wanted to check it out. But it rounded off and basically caught onto the threads there. Anyway, it caught on, it just spun. That's all it could do. I couldn't tug on it. I couldn't get a grip on it, no nothing. What I eventually did is I just got my Dremel with my attachments, and I went to town and cut into it. These are just a little 10 millimeter, M6 acorn nut. So I cut into it. I showed that in a previous clip that I got, but I got it off. I got that, removed it, cleaned up all the metal fragments, and we're good to go. So I'll get this valve adjustment done, and we will hopefully get that part in about a week. That'll give us enough time to actually go work and make some money, and at which time we'll put that back on. We'll get the supercharger back on, and then we'll head over to actually working on what we started with, and that is getting that clutch flywheel back in. And then we can, now that the weather is up in the 70s and 80s, we'll get this transmission cleaned off properly, and if the seals need replaced, we'll go ahead and replace all those nasty seals. We should be up and running hopefully by the end of May. I was really hoping to be started and running and driving down the road before May, but I don't think that's going to happen. So just a quick update and letting you know where I'm at and what we're doing. If you have any questions, comments, even some bitches or belly aches or moans and groans, you let me know in the comment sections below, and I'll keep you updated. Thanks a lot.